Hello, my name is Chunhwa Kim from Hanmaum Church in Chuncheon. I had many sad experiences and suffered much pain from many illnesses during my life, but God saved me. I'd like to share this grace with you. I was born as the second of 6 children. Our house was always busy and noisy. We didn't have a lot, but we at least had enough to eat. But one day, my family moved into a cabin in the mountains. We built the house out of pine trees we had cut down ourselves. In the summer, rain leaked in and flooded the house. Also, our food ran out, and I remember crying because I was hungry. It was a year of bad crops, so farmers and their families had to pass a rough time as they waited for the next harvest. Everyone was having a hard time, so my father had wanted to help our neighbors by co-signing a loan. Then, he ended up taking responsibility for the entire loan, and that was what had happened to us. We sold everything we had to pay back the loan, so we had nothing. I couldn't even go to school. I thought that it was a great sin not to be educated. My lack of education burdened me my entire life. In the spring, when I turned 9 years old, my mother came home with the flower print blouse she had bought for me to wear. She said, "I'll give it to you later, go and make rice." But I wanted to wear the blouse so badly that I snuck into the room and tried the blouse on. Mother soon came back to the house because she didn't see any smoke from the kitchen chimney. She yelled, "I told you to wait until I made enough money to buy clothes for the rest of your siblings too." Then she went back to the field. But at that moment, I had an odd thought. If I am gone, Mother will be less tired and be able to save money for more clothes and food. So I drank the pesticide that my father had stored for his farm work. Immediately, my arms and legs began to twist around and everything looked yellow. I got scared. "God, please save me. I want to live with my mom. I don't want to part with my mom." I repeated this over and over and lay down in the bedroom. I vomited the pesticide onto the floor. I survived because all of my stomach lining got peeled off and were vomited out of me like strips of noodles. At the time, I didn't know God. I had never even had a chance to listen to God's word. But instinctively, I had sought Him, and God took pity on me and saved me. I thought I could escape poverty if I got married. I married a man who worked in the mines. Our first home was a very small rented room. My husband found his work very hard and drank several bottles a day. When he got drunk, he got angry and wrecked things. When he couldn't control his temper, he beat our children and me. Also, he didn't give us any money for living expenses, so I had to borrow money from people. My husband always insulted me in front of other people by calling me a stupid, uneducated wench. He also insulted my family. I was afraid of him, but at the same time, I was full of hatred for him. One day, one of my younger brothers died. He was just a young man in his 20s. I was very shocked and heartbroken. I wanted to cry, but there was no place to cry. So I went up into the mountains, dug a hole in the ground, buried my face inside of it, and wept loudly. In the mines, people were always scared of accidents like tunnels collapsing. There was an old belief that it was bad luck for women to cry or stand in the path of men on their way to work, so I had to cry secretly. Then, a year later, my father suddenly passed away a week after he visited our home. I couldn't believe it, but when I went to his place, it was true. The year after that, my mother passed away from the grief of losing her husband and child. Then, a year after that, another one of my brothers died from an electric shock working at a construction site. He was also in his 20s. I couldn't believe it, so I waited for my dead brother in front of the hospital because I thought he would come out alive for sure and everything would be fixed. Then I think I fainted. After I woke up, I was told that the funeral was already over. When my father was alive, we had faithfully worshipped our ancestors, so I beat my chest as I cried out, "Why? Why did these things happen to us?" Every day I could barely walk. I had to quit my work at the factory. My mind and body were in ruins. Every day was hell. I didn't know why I had to go on living. And when my neighbors asked me what was wrong, I didn't tell them anything. From that time on, many people came to tell me the gospel. I yelled at them, "I'm having a hard enough time living my life. Stop telling me to believe in God." I was so angry because they told me to believe in some strange man from Israel as God. They also said that they were having worship service at home and dragged me to their homes. I didn't like Jesus, but for some reason I would always weep a lot whenever I heard hymns. Sometimes I just ran back home because I was weeping so much. It became more and more difficult for me to leave the house. I couldn't talk to people because I got angry just by looking at their faces. When I was lying in bed at home, I felt like a cobweb was wrapped around me very tightly. Also, I could see things happening outside clearly even though I was inside the house. I could see people chewing gum and people wearing sandals. When I looked out the window, the people I had just seen really were out there doing just that. I grew very scared. And all night long, I could hear someone laughing at me, saying, ha 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 ha. So I couldn't sleep. I ended up collapsing with a cerebral hemorrhage. It took almost 7 years for me to recover. At home, I could hear the trains outside, and I wondered when I would be able to ride the train and go to places freely. But I was afraid that I would collapse again, so I couldn't go outside. After I had brain surgery, I constantly had a cold. Then one day, I couldn't eat at all, so I went to the doctor. I was diagnosed with tuberculosis. I had to take pills for 13 months to recover fully. But then immediately afterwards, my hands stiffened and I couldn't bend my fingers. I dropped the things that I was holding, so I took medicine and had acupuncture for a year. But I didn't heal, so I had to have neurosurgery on both of my hands. After the surgery on my hands, this time my face turned white. I visited many hospitals for a cure, but everyone said that it didn't seem curable. I was coming back home with a dejected heart when I thought, I should ask God for help. I felt very earnest about this. I went into a random church and prayed. I didn't know how to pray, but I said, God, if you are really there, please show me. Then I tried visiting many different churches trying to meet the living God. If someone said, my pastor is good, come to my church, or God really lives at our church, I followed them there. But even though people said that God was alive, I couldn't see him. One Christmas, when everyone seemed so happy, I thought about how I had seen many sad things happen and suffered through many diseases, and this made me ache inside. While I was sleepless from sorrow, I suddenly remembered what my youngest son had said. Mom, please try reading the Gospel of John. Jesus rose from the dead. I got out the Bible and opened it to the Gospel of John. It said that no one has ever seen God, but the one and only Son, who is himself God, has made him known. And Jesus was the one who made him known. I was incredibly shocked by this. Also, the verse that said, For God so loved the world, he gave his one and only Son, came into my heart, pure and clear. I was so happy. I held on to this verse, and it made my heart pound. It made me so happy that I couldn't sleep. I spent the whole night awake. A year passed, and through my youngest son's earnest prayers and requests, I came to his church and I met the risen Jesus. After I met the risen Jesus, who died and rose again for my sin of not wanting God in my heart, I no longer cared that I had wasted so many years because of my illness. The joy of meeting the risen Jesus was so huge that nothing else came to mind. I was so happy to hear that the risen Jesus was my Lord and my God. I had never been so happy and excited in all of my life. After I repented the sin of not believing in Jesus and came to believe in Jesus as the Lord of my heart, I didn't need to wander around looking for God anymore. When I believed according to the sign of Jonah, the proof that he rose from the dead, I thought that Jesus alone was enough for me. After I came back home, I read the Bible over and over again, all night long. I began to understand the verses that were difficult before, and all the verses were sweeter than honey. I spent several days and nights staying up and reading the Bible. Only when I got sick from exhaustion because I stayed up so long did I stop reading. After believing in Jesus, my heart was just filled with joy. All of my sadness, fears, and anxieties turned into peace. I used to depend on sedatives, but I didn't have to take them anymore. All the scars of my heart vanished when I heard about the death of the old self and the birth of the new creation. I had always been verbally abused and insulted by my husband in front of many people. Whenever my husband made mean and sarcastic remarks about the death of my family members, I hated him and wanted to kill him. But when Jesus died on the cross, God also nailed me on that cross and had me killed. When Jesus rose again, he also raised me again and made me into a new creation. Amen. My soul was not my old self, stained with scars. I was now a new creation, purer than snow. Amen. I am no longer a person who is bound by her past hurts. When the scars of my heart disappeared and joy came upon me in this way, all of my physical illnesses went away and I grew healthier. I used to always lie in bed or crawl around the bedroom. People said that cerebral hemorrhage could return. I was afraid of that, so I couldn't go outside of the house. But because Jesus is my Lord, my fears disappeared. I began to think that the devil was trying to scare me into staying inside, so I gathered up my courage and stepped out of the house. I wasn't even able to walk in the past, but I went grocery shopping and took a walk in the park. And nothing bad happened at all. The sky was pretty, the mountains were pretty, and the flowers by the streets were so pretty too. I took the train and went to the Yongsan Family Park and Chunhwa Creek. I went wherever I wanted to go, freely. God cured the whiteness of my face called leukoplakia, which every hospital said was difficult to cure. I felt like I didn't have to take any medication anymore, so I stopped. It's been 7 years since I stopped. Amen. Now I go to Sunday school with my grandson and sit for a long time through morning and afternoon Sunday worship services. But I don't get tired. I can even stand here and give my testimony like this. I used to get so angry when I looked at people's faces that I couldn't even speak. But now I can meet people freely and enjoy conversations with them. I used to think that people knew all about the scars in my heart and were laughing at me because of them, so I always closed myself off and couldn't even look at them. But now I've become somebody who goes to people who are hurt and gives them comfort. Amen. Above all, I saw how my husband was suffering, though I had become so happy as a believer of Jesus. So I started to pray for my husband. I began to feel very sorry for him because he had been depressed and angry his whole life from the pain of not having a father. A mercy was poured into my heart that covered all of our years together and much more. I prayed for God to save my husband, and so thankfully my husband came to believe in Jesus. Amen. Also, God poured a love for souls into me, and I couldn't just sit still at home. So I went outside every day to share the gospel. I walked to my grandson's kindergarten with him and hand out gospel tracts to everyone we meet on the way. Disabled people, the elderly, middle and high school students. I share the gospel with everyone I meet. I go into every shopping complex and greet all the business owners and customers there with, "Hello, I came from Hanmaum Church. I have wonderful news. Jesus rose from the dead. Please read this tract and attend a church close to your home." I give the gospel tracts to students too and say, "The resurrection of Jesus is a historical fact. Please read this and attend a church near your home." Then the students get very interested and read the tract several times. I love sharing the gospel in parks. One time, there were 10 elderly ladies and gentlemen sitting in a park. I gave them the gospel tracts. A few of them said, "Don't take those," and fled the place, but most of them stayed and read them. Another time, there was an elderly gentleman who couldn't read the tract because of his poor vision, so I put on my glasses and read it for him. He listened very carefully. Then I also read him a testimony I wrote. After he listened to all of that, he said, "Who wrote that? It's amazing." I found out that this gentleman had a PhD. When someone so well educated told me that what I had written was amazing, it was my turn to be amazed. I hadn't even gone to elementary school, so I had always lamented the fact that I didn't have an education, and I had felt very burdened because of that. Though I am unlearned in the academics of this world, I came to know the wisdom of heaven.
Amen.
I am now a new creation who died with Jesus and was born again. When I look back on my whole life, I have absolutely nothing to boast about. In my life, which is like a mist, the most joyful and happiest thing, the only thing I want to boast about, is that the risen Jesus became my Lord.
Amen.
If there is anyone who is suffering because of the sadness, scars of the heart, and illnesses as you have lived in this world, I hope that you will meet the risen Jesus and have all of your scars healed and enjoy a prosperous life. Thank you.